The morning bell of the Galactic Academy of Allied Species echoed through the wide metal halls. The sound was calm and soft like wind through crystal. Students of all colors, shapes, and worlds moved between classes. Some floated. Some clicked on claws. Some carried energy fields that shimmered like jellyfish. For them, this was normal. The galaxy was full of strange things, but today something new walked through the main door. Her name was Mira Hale, a human from the blue planet called Terra. To the galaxy, Terra was known by another name, Deathworld. It was a place where gravity was cruel, weather could kill, and life fought every second just to exist. Mira didn't look dangerous. She was small compared to the towering reptilian species, pale compared to the glowing desert-born aliens, and quiet compared to the loud avian students. Her hair was dark, her eyes calm, and her bag looked too light to carry much. Still, when she walked down the hall, the crowd made space for her. Whispers began to spread. "Is that her? The human? Deathworlder? She doesn't look like a monster." Mira heard the whispers, but she kept walking. Her face stayed calm, almost peaceful. She had grown up hearing people talk, judge, and doubt. None of that was new. She entered classroom C9, where Xenocultural Studies was about to begin. The room was round, with desks shaped in a half circle. The teacher, a tall, silver-skinned being named Instructor Valen, looked up as she entered. "Ah, you must be our new transfer student," Valen said, voice smooth like wind on glass. "Please introduce yourself." Mira stood by the doorway and nodded politely. "My name is Mira Hale. I'm from Earth. It's an honor to study here." Simple words, but the room went silent. There were 8 other students, each from a different species. Their eyes, some slit, some compound, some glowing, watched her like predators measuring prey. Only one seemed unimpressed. A large reptilian male, scales dark green with gold stripes, leaned back in his seat. His name was Jurek of Vakar Prime, heir of a warrior family that had fought in 3 interstellar wars. His claws tapped against his desk as he looked her up and down. "A Deathworlder," he said, his deep voice cutting through the air. "I expected someone taller." A few students chuckled quietly. Mira's lips curved into a small smile. Not forced, not mocking, just calm. "We come in many sizes," she replied. Instructor Valen motioned for her to take a seat. She sat at the edge next to a student who looked like a floating ball of light. The light whispered softly, "Don't worry. He always tests new people." Mira gave a polite nod. "That's fine," she whispered back. "I've passed harder tests." The lecture began. Valen spoke about cultural displays of dominance among galactic species. It was a subject that mixed anthropology and diplomacy. On many worlds, dominance was shown through size, sound, or scent. On others, it was through silence, patience, or pain tolerance. While Valen explained, Mira took notes carefully. Her handwriting was neat, her attention sharp, but she could feel Jurek's stare. He didn't look away even once. His eyes carried that heavy kind of pride that came from generations of warriors who believed fear was respect. After 30 minutes, Valen called for discussion. "Let's hear some examples," he said. "How do your species display dominance?" The avian girl raised her clawed hand first. "On Aerith, dominance is shown through volume. The loudest song wins leadership." "Interesting," Valen nodded. "And Vakar Prime?" Jurek smiled, showing sharp teeth. "We use challenges. A duel, or at least the threat of one. Only the strong lead. Weakness invites chaos." He looked directly at Mira when he said it. Valen noticed, but said nothing yet. "And humans, Miss Hale?" Mira looked up from her notes. Her voice stayed calm. "We don't have one rule. On Earth, dominance can mean many things. Some people show power through control. Others through kindness. Some through silence. It depends on what you value." A few students looked confused. One whispered, "Kindness is dominance?" Mira smiled slightly. "Sometimes, yes. It takes strength to choose not to fight." Jurek let out a rough laugh. "Spoken like someone who's never fought for real." The room tensed. Valen started to speak, but Mira gently raised a hand. "It's all right, Instructor," she said. "Let him speak." Jurek leaned forward, eyes glinting. "On my world, peace means you're too scared to stand." "And on mine," Mira answered softly, "peace means you've already stood too many times to need to." A few students murmured. The floating light beside her flickered brighter, as if impressed. Jurek's claws tapped again. He didn't like how calm she stayed. He wanted to see the fear he expected from prey. Instead, she met his eyes and didn't blink. The tension in the room thickened like fog. Then with a slow motion, Jurek reached into his side pouch. The metal clicked. He pulled out a small blade. A pocket knife, shiny, curved, ceremonial. Gasps filled the air. The avian student's feathers puffed up. The floating light dimmed. Valen's voice rose sharply. Jurek! What are you— It's a Vicarian, right? Jurek interrupted, his tone almost proud. A show of challenge. No harm intended, just education. He twirled the knife in his claws. The light danced on its blade. Mira didn't move. She just looked at it. Slowly, she tilted her head. A pocket knife, she said. Her voice was steady, even curious. Interesting choice. The class was frozen. Valen didn't know what to do. Technically, Jurek hadn't broken a law yet, but everyone could feel the edge of danger in the air. Mira stood up quietly. Her chair made the smallest sound against the floor. She took one step forward. You said this is a right, she said softly. To show strength? Yes, Jurek replied. His tail flicked behind him. To remind others of their place. And what happens, Mira asked, if the other doesn't move? Jurek frowned slightly. Then they accept submission, Mira smiled. Not mockingly, gently. On my world, we call that standing your ground. For a moment, no one breathed. The knife caught the light again, a thin reflection dancing on the wall. Jurek lifted it slightly, not in attack, but in a display of superiority. It was enough to send fear through most species, but Mira wasn't most species. Her eyes stayed on the knife, then moved back to his face. You know, she said, on Earth we use knives like that to open cans or cut fruit. A few students blinked in surprise. One even laughed nervously. It's not a weapon to us, she continued. It's a tool, useful, simple, but dangerous only when misused. Jurek didn't understand why his scales itched with unease. He felt as though a predator watched him now. Mira slowly reached into her own satchel. The room tensed again. Even Valen started forward. But Mira only pulled out a small, dull multi-tool, scratched and worn, the kind you'd use on a camping trip. She placed it gently on her desk, the sound soft but clear. This is mine, she said. I've carried it since I was 12. It's seen storms, fires, and once a bear that thought I looked tasty. No one spoke. Even Jurek's tail froze. She touched the metal softly. Where I come from, survival doesn't mean being stronger than others. It means being smarter, more patient, more human. Then she looked straight at Jurek. If you think that knife makes you dangerous, you've never met the world that made me. Silence. The kind that pressed on the skin. Jurek's claws trembled slightly. His instincts screamed. Something deep in his ancient bloodline, the part that once feared larger predators, told him to stop. He looked at her calm face. No anger, no hate, just calm power. Finally, he clicked the knife closed and set it down. I see, he muttered. Mira gave a small nod. Good, she said. Lesson complete. The class exhaled together. Even Valen's metallic shoulders relaxed. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the floating light whispered softly. That was something. Mira sat back down and picked up her pen. Just a misunderstanding, she said quietly, and began to take notes again as if nothing had happened. Jurek didn't look at her again for the rest of the class. But deep inside, something had changed. When the bell rang, students left quietly, whispering behind their hands and wings. She didn't even raise her voice. He looked scared. Humans are strange. Mira stayed behind, packing her things. Valen walked over, his silver eyes thoughtful. Miss Hale, he said softly, that was impressive. But dangerous. I know, she replied. But sometimes the best way to stop a fight is to end it before it starts. Valen nodded slowly. You've made an impression today. Mira smiled faintly. Good or bad? Both, he admitted. But it will make them think. And perhaps, he added with a slight smile, it will make them learn. Mira's gaze drifted toward the window where stars glowed like distant fires. That's why I'm here, she said quietly. To learn too. When she left the classroom, the halls were quieter than before. Students glanced at her, then quickly looked away. Mira didn't mind. She had expected it. That was how every new beginning started. First with fear, then with understanding. She touched the small multi-tool in her pocket, feeling its familiar weight. On Earth, it had saved her more than once. Here, it had saved something else, peace. The story of what happened in classroom C9 spread through the academy faster than light. By the next morning, every hallway buzzed with whispers. The Deathworld girl stared down Jurek. She made him put the knife away without even moving. She smiled at him. Who smiles at a Vicarian challenge? Mira heard it all as she walked down the corridor, but she kept her expression calm. The other students stepped aside to give her space as if she carried invisible gravity around her. It didn't make her proud. It made her tired. She hadn't come to be feared. She'd come to learn. When she reached her locker, the floating light being from her class drifted beside her. The glow pulsed softly like a heartbeat. "Good morning," Mira said with a gentle smile. "Good morning," the light replied, voice humming. "I'm Solon. You were amazing yesterday." Mira shook her head. "I wasn't amazing. I was lucky." "He could have hurt someone." Solon flickered. "But he didn't. You stopped him without fighting. No one's ever done that with a Vicarian before." Mira sighed quietly. "On Earth, fighting is the last thing you do when talking fails. I just wanted him to understand." Solon tilted slightly, glowing a little brighter. "Everyone's talking about you now. They call you the calm Deathworlder." Mira laughed softly. That sounds like a bad movie title. But inside, she felt uneasy. She didn't want fame. Fear disguised as respect was dangerous. It built walls where bridges should be. Later that day in the academy cafeteria, Mira carried her tray to an empty table. The room was loud, different languages mixing like static, but it grew quieter as she sat. Her food was simple: grain stew, some fruit, and water. Nothing strange, nothing special, but she could feel eyes on her from every direction. A group of insectoid students whispered among themselves. A pair of bird folk looked away when she glanced at them. Even a group of synthetic students, machines with glowing cores, paused mid-conversation. Mira sighed. "So much for blending in," she murmured. She picked up her spoon and began to eat. Each movement was calm, measured. Her heartbeat stayed steady. On a death world, that kind of control was survival. Then she noticed movement. Jurek was walking toward her. The cafeteria's noise dimmed. Trays stopped clattering. Conversations froze. Even Solon, who had been floating nearby, dimmed his glow in nervousness. Jurek's heavy steps echoed. His tall frame cast a long shadow across her table. He stopped right in front of her. "Mira Hale," he said. His voice was deep but not as harsh as before. "May I sit?" Mira looked up, her spoon still in her hand. "Of course," she said simply. He sat down opposite her. The metal bench creaked slightly under his weight. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, filled only by the soft hum of the air filters. Then Jurek said, "You made me look weak." Mira set her spoon down. "That wasn't my goal." He looked down at his claws, flexing them. "On my world, when someone challenges you and you don't win, you lose everything. Status, pride, honor. You didn't even fight. That makes it worse." Mira studied him quietly. His tone wasn't angry now, it was confused, almost lost. "Do you feel weaker?" she asked. "Because I didn't hurt you?" He frowned. "I feel uncertain." Mira leaned forward slightly. "Then maybe that's the lesson. You don't have to fight to learn strength." Jurek's eyes lifted, meeting hers. "You speak like a teacher." She smiled faintly. "I'm just a student who survived a difficult world." For a moment, something shifted between them. The tension eased just a little. Jurek sighed. "My people think humans are wild animals. They say your planet makes monsters." Mira's smile didn't fade. "They're half right. It makes survivors." He studied her carefully, his golden eyes narrowing. "I want to understand that." "Why you didn't fear me?" Mira looked down at her hands. "Because on Earth, fear is normal. You learn to live with it. You don't run, you use it. You let it teach you what to do next." Jurek stayed silent for a while, tail flicking behind him slowly. Then he stood. "Next class is in 10 minutes, he said quietly. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't a command either. Mira stood, grabbed her bag, and followed him. The crowd parted again, whispering as they passed. Some thought they were about to fight. Others thought Jurek wanted revenge. But Mira just walked beside him, calm as a shadow. They reached the engineering lab, where students were assigned in pairs to build small mechanical drones for a teamwork project. Instructor Valen waited near the door. "Ah, good," Valen said as they entered. "Mira, you'll be working with Jurek." The room fell quiet again, even Jurek seemed surprised. "With her?" Valen smiled faintly. Yes, you both displayed strong personalities in the last class. I expect that energy to become productivity. Mira nodded politely. Understood. Jurek grunted but said nothing more. They took their seats at a shared workbench covered in tools, wires, and metallic parts. Around them, other pairs began working, cutting, welding, or programming. For a few minutes, silence hung heavy between them. Then Mira picked up a small piece of circuitry. We need a base frame first, she said. Something stable. Jurek folded his arms. I was thinking something strong. Reinforced plating. Defense first. Strong is good, Mira said, but if it can't adapt, it breaks. He frowned. Adaptation is not always an advantage. On Earth, she replied, it's the only reason we exist. That made him pause. Slowly, he leaned closer to study the parts she arranged. Show me, he said. And so she did. Mira's hands moved quickly but carefully. She explained each choice in simple terms. How balance mattered more than brute force. How weight affected agility. How flexibility could save energy. Jurek listened, still skeptical, but curious. He added his own ideas, stronger legs, thicker joints, better armor. Together, they built a design that combined both worlds, Earth's adaptability and Vakar's raw power. Hours passed without them noticing. When they finally activated the small drone, it stood on 6 legs, balanced perfectly. Its sensors blinked to life. It took a few steps, wobbled, then stabilized itself. Mira smiled. Not bad for 2 people who almost fought. Jurek gave a low laugh, deep and rough. It's efficient. Efficient is human for good, she said, half teasing. He tilted his head. I am beginning to understand your kind, Mira Hale. Are you? She asked softly. Maybe, he said. You win by not fighting. You show power through calm. You make others think instead of fear. Mira looked up at him. That's not power, Jurek. That's peace, he blinked slowly, confused again. Peace is power, that is strange. It's human, she said simply. After class, Instructor Valen stopped them at the door. Impressive work, he said. The drone performed better than expected. You two seem to make an effective team. Jurek gave a small nod. She works differently. But it works, Mira smiled. That's all teamwork is. As they left, other students watched them, whispering again, but this time with a different tone. Curiosity instead of fear. Solon floated nearby and whispered to Mira. You tamed a Vicarian warrior. How did you do that? Mira laughed softly. I didn't tame him. I just listened. That evening, the Academy's twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the metal domes gold and orange. Mira sat alone in the courtyard garden, surrounded by alien plants glowing faintly under the sky. She held her multi-tool in her hand, turning it over in the fading light. It had been her father's once. He used it to fix everything back home, broken fences, old machines, even toys. He'd told her, a tool is just a piece of metal until you learn how to use it wisely. She smiled at the memory. Behind her, heavy footsteps approached. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Can I join you? Jurek asked. Sure, she said, moving slightly so he could sit. He looked around at the strange glowing plants. These remind me of the forests on my homeworld. Except they don't try to eat you. Mira chuckled. On Earth some do. He looked at her sideways. You laugh about that. Because it's funny, she said simply. If you don't laugh, you lose to fear. Jurek nodded slowly. You humans! You survive by turning pain into humor. Fear into calm, danger into curiosity. It's confusing. It's how we stay sane, she replied. He looked up at the stars. Maybe your world made you strong because it had to. Maybe that's why you're not afraid of anything. Mira shook her head. I'm afraid of many things, Jurek. I just don't let fear decide what I do. For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the Academy's shields and the distant chatter of students. Then Jurek said quietly, I told my people about you. They didn't believe me. They said no human could defeat a Vicarian without weapons. I didn't defeat you, she said. I stopped you. He smiled, showing sharp teeth but no threat behind them. Same thing in a way. Mira looked at him, then at the stars again. Maybe someday the galaxy will understand. Humans don't want to rule. We just want to live and help others do the same. Jurek followed her gaze. You might have a harder fight with that than with me. Maybe, she said softly. But one lesson at a time. The night deepened. The academy lights dimmed. Mira stayed in the garden long after Jurek left, thinking about how strange it was, how fear could turn into understanding when you faced it instead of running. Somewhere inside the academy's walls, whispers were still spreading. But they carried a new message now. The Deathworld girl didn't just end a lesson. She started one. Days passed since the incident in the classroom. Mira Hale had become a quiet legend in the Galactic Academy. Students still whispered when she walked by, but the tone had changed. Fear had turned into respect. Even Jurek, the proud warrior from Vakar Prime, had changed. He still walked tall, still carried his sharp confidence, but now there was something new in him, a trace of humility. Sometimes the other students saw the two of them talking after class, sharing ideas, even laughing. No one had ever seen a Deathworld human and a Vakarian warrior act like friends. The academy itself seemed calmer after that. Small fights and challenges dropped. Students thought twice before testing each other. And when they did, they often remembered the human girl who had stopped a fight without lifting a hand. That morning, Mira sat in the library with Solon, the glowing light being who had become her first real friend. The air shimmered with quiet energy as students studied or whispered across tables. Solon floated near her shoulder. "You know, you've changed this place," it said softly. Mira smiled a little. "I didn't mean to." "Maybe not," Solon replied. "But you did. Everyone watches you now. Even the teachers talk about your human calmness," she chuckled. "That sounds like a strange thing to study." "It's more powerful than you think," Solon said. "Most species fight or flee when scared. You just breathe." Mira closed her book and looked out the window. Beyond the academy walls, the twin suns glowed faintly behind the shield dome. Ships drifted through the blue sky, trade vessels, transports, scouts. Life in the galaxy was peaceful. At least it seemed peaceful. By the afternoon, that peace cracked. It began with a small tremor. At first, everyone thought it was just a drill. The academy often ran safety checks. Then the tremor came again, harder this time. The lights flickered. Alarms started to ring. "Warning," said a voice from the speakers. "Unknown energy surge detected. Outer defense field compromised." Students dropped their books. Some screamed. Through the tall glass windows, they could see the sky flash red as the defense shields rippled. Mira's instincts sharpened immediately. On Earth, survival depended on acting fast, not freezing. She grabbed Solon's glow gently. "Let's go. We need to find Instructor Valen." As she ran into the hall, Jurek appeared from the opposite direction. His claws clicked on the floor, eyes blazing with alertness. "Human," he called out. "You feel it too?" "Yes," Mira said. Something hit the outer dome. They ran side by side toward the main control corridor. Panic spread around them. Students rushing, teachers shouting orders. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal. When they reached the command room, Instructor Valen stood before a large holographic screen. His silver skin reflected the red emergency lights. "Mira, Jurek, good. We need calm minds now," Valen said quickly. "Something's wrong with the outer generator. It's not an attack, it's a malfunction. But if it collapses, the oxygen field will fail." "How long do we have?" Mira asked. 20 minutes at most, Valen said grimly. The image showed the Academy's outer dome, a massive transparent shield powered by a cluster of energy nodes. One node blinked red, flickering wildly. "That's the damage point," Valen explained. "But the chamber's pressure has dropped. It's dangerous to go inside." Mira studied the map. "It's fixable?" "Yes," Valen said. "Someone must reset the node manually. The system's auto-repair is offline." Jurek's tail flicked. "Then we go." Valen shook his head. "The chamber is unstable. Heat and vacuum exposure could kill you both." Mira looked at Jurek. Then she looked back at Valen. "We'll be careful," she said simply. They suited up in light pressure gear. Not full space armor, but enough to breathe and move. Mira adjusted her helmet, feeling the familiar hum of oxygen flow. Jurek checked her seals twice. "Your world may be deadly, but this dome could crush you faster," he warned. She smiled through the helmet glass. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." Together, they entered the damaged section through a small airlock. The metal door sealed behind them with a hiss. Inside, the corridor was filled with smoke and flickering blue light. The floor vibrated with the pulse of unstable energy. Sparks danced across the walls like lightning trapped in metal veins. Jurek growled low. The node's in the next chamber. Mira moved ahead, scanning the control panel with her small handheld tool. Circuits are fried. We'll have to reroute power manually. He frowned. Manually? That's impossible without... She pulled the old multi-tool from her belt and smiled. Without this? Jurek gave a rough laugh. You still carry that piece of scrap? It saved me more times than I can count, she said, crouching by the panel. Her fingers moved quickly, twisting wires, reconnecting lines. Sparks jumped dangerously close, but she didn't flinch. Jurek watched, amazed at how calm she stayed even as the walls trembled around them. Pressure dropping, the helmet AI announced. Work faster, Jurek said, moving to hold a loose pipe steady. His claws scorched slightly, but he didn't complain. Mira worked fast but steady, breathing evenly. Almost there, the floor shook violently. A piece of the ceiling crashed down, missing them by inches. Jurek shielded her with his arm, roaring as dust filled the air. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, she said. You? He grinned. Still alive. Good, she said. Keep that up. Finally, she twisted the last wire into place and hit the power control. The blue light on the wall flickered. Once, twice, and then steadied into a strong glow. Balin's voice came through the comms. Energy reading stable. The shield is holding. Mira exhaled, leaning against the wall. Good to hear. Jurek let out a deep rumbling laugh. You did it, human. We did it, she corrected. But before they could leave, another warning flashed on the screen. Secondary surge detected, said the AI. Core overheating. Jurek's head snapped up. The reactor? Mira's heart pounded. If it blows, the entire academy's done. Valen's voice came again, urgent. You need to vent the core manually before pressure exceeds threshold. Mira looked at Jurek. Can you hold the valve while I release the clamps? He nodded. On your mark. They ran into the core chamber, a wide, glowing space filled with whirling energy. Heat waves shimmered around them, even through their suits. The reactor stood in the center, thrumming like a giant heartbeat. Blue lightning arched across its surface. Mira climbed the side ladder, gripping tight as vibrations shook her. Her hands burned under the gloves, but she didn't stop. Now, she shouted. Jurek slammed his claws into the main valve, holding it steady as energy hissed and roared. The pressure gauge dropped slowly and too slowly, almost there. Mira called, turning the final clamp. The metal resisted, screeching. Her muscles screamed. Then, with a loud click, the valve locked open. The reactor stabilized. The blue light softened. The roar faded to a low hum. Silence. Then Valen's voice came through again. You did it. The dome's safe. Mira closed her eyes and breathed out slowly. Jurek dropped to one knee, panting. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The danger had passed, but their hearts still raced. Then Jurek looked up at her and said quietly, You risked your life for this place. So did you, she said, climbing down. He nodded. Maybe now I understand. On your world, danger is life. But you face it with calm. Mira smiled faintly. That's how humans survive. One step, one breath, one problem at a time, he laughed softly. You're not a Deathworlder, Mira Hale, you're something else. Maybe, she said. But Deathworlders can be nice too. When they returned to the academy, cheers erupted. Students and teachers filled the hall, clapping, shouting, glowing in their own alien ways. Solon floated forward, pulsing bright. You saved us. Mira smiled shyly. We just fixed what was broken. Valen placed a metallic hand on her shoulder. You did more than that. You reminded us what courage looks like. Jurek stood beside her, tall and proud. She taught me that strength doesn't need to roar, he said loudly. Sometimes it just needs to stay calm. The crowd cheered again. Even those who had once feared her now looked at her with admiration. Mira didn't know what to say. She had never liked attention, but seeing all those faces, so different yet united, filled her chest with warmth. Maybe this was what humanity was meant to bring to the stars. Not power, not dominance, but balance. That night, the Academy's dome was peaceful again. Mira sat outside in the garden, her multi-tool resting on her knee. Jurek joined her, sitting quietly. You know, he said, on my planet, saving a city makes you a legend. Mira smiled at the stars. On mine, it just means you did your job, he chuckled. Still humble, she turned to him. Still proud. They both laughed softly. After a long pause, Jurek said, When I first met you, I thought humans were dangerous. Mira raised an eyebrow. We are, he smiled. Yes, but not how I thought. You're dangerous because you make others want to be better. Mira looked back at the stars, her voice quiet. That's the best kind of danger. The twin suns rose slowly beyond the horizon, bathing the academy in gold. A new day began, calm and bright, and across the galaxy, the story of the Deathworld girl spread, not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder that even among the stars where strength often meant war, humanity's greatest weapon was still its heart.